He saved two dying Apache women, but had no idea their arrival would break his rules forever. The desert morning always arrived slowly, as if the land itself needed time to wake up. The sky turned from deep blue to pale gold, and the first light touched the long stretches of dry grass that surrounded the ranch. A single horse stood near a wooden fence, breathing quietly into the cool air, while a man moved steadily between the barns and the open field. He lived alone. That was not an accident. Years earlier, he had decided that silence was easier than noise and distance was safer than closeness. People from nearby towns knew about him. A rancher who worked hard, spoke little, and never asked anyone for help. Some said he was strong, others said he was stubborn. The truth was simpler. He followed rules, and those rules kept his life steady. Every morning started the same way. He checked the animals, repaired broken boards, and walked the land with careful attention. The ranch sat far from busy roads, surrounded by wide desert hills and open sky. It was a place where time felt slower, where a man could hear his own thoughts clearly. He had built his rules slowly over the years. No visitors unless necessary. No staying in town longer than needed. No promises he could not keep, and most important, no attachments that could break his focus. These rules had not appeared from nowhere. They came from experience, from moments that had taught him that caring too deeply sometimes brought pain he could not control. The wind moved gently across the land that morning, carrying dust and the distant cry of a bird. He paused near the fence, watching the horizon. It was a habit he had formed long ago, always watching, always aware. Out here, noticing small changes could mean the difference between safety and trouble. The day passed quietly. He worked under the growing heat of the sun, fixing a broken gate and clearing stones from a path. Sweat gathered on his forehead, but he moved with steady patience. Hard work felt simple. Hard work did not ask questions or bring unexpected emotions. It only required effort. By afternoon, the sky began to change. Dark clouds gathered in the distance, moving faster than usual. Storms in the desert could appear without warning, and he recognized the signs immediately. He secured loose tools, checked the barn doors, and prepared the animals for the coming weather. As the first drops of rain touched the ground, he climbed onto his horse and started riding along the outer edge of his land, making sure nothing had been left open. The wind grew stronger, carrying sand and small branches through the air. Lightning flashed far away, turning the horizon into a bright line for a brief moment. He turned his horse toward home, planning to reach the ranch before the storm grew worse. That was when he noticed something unusual. At first, it looked like nothing more than shadows near the dry riverbed. The storm made it hard to see clearly, and the fading light created strange shapes on the ground. But something about the scene felt wrong. He slowed his horse, narrowing his eyes as he looked again. Two figures lay motionless near the edge of the sand. His first reaction was hesitation. Out here, unexpected situations often meant trouble. Strangers could bring danger, conflict, or responsibilities he did not want. His rules whispered in his mind, keep moving, avoid involvement, protect your peace. He guided the horse closer anyway. As he approached, the shapes became clearer. Two women lay side by side, their clothes marked by dust and long travel. Their faces showed exhaustion and their breathing was faint but present. They looked as if they had walked for days without rest. The rancher felt a heavy silence settle around him. The storm wind rushed past, but inside him everything slowed. He could leave. No one would know. The desert had its own way of deciding what survived and what did not. Helping them would mean bringing strangers into his world, breaking the boundaries he had worked so hard to maintain. But another thought rose stronger than the rest. If he rode away, they would not survive the night. He stepped down from his horse. The ground felt colder than expected under his boots. He knelt beside them carefully, checking for signs of life. One woman opened her eyes slightly, confusion and fear flickering before exhaustion pulled her back into stillness. The other did not move, but her breathing continued, slow and weak. For a long moment he remained there, caught between decision and memory. He remembered times when he had needed help and none had come. He remembered promises made to himself about staying distant. The storm thundered louder, pushing him toward action. Without speaking, he lifted the first woman gently onto his horse, then carefully helped the second beside her. The task was difficult alone, but determination gave him strength. Once both were secure, he climbed up behind them and turned toward the ranch. The ride back felt longer than usual. Rain began falling harder, soaking his clothes and blurring the path ahead. He kept one hand steady on the reins and another ready to support the fragile figures in front of him. Each step of the horse felt important, each breath a reminder that lives now depended on him. When the ranch finally came into view, relief washed through him, though he did not show it outwardly. He guided the horse into the barn first, protecting them from the storm, then slowly carried the women inside the house. The familiar quiet of the ranch felt different now. The empty rooms no longer belonged only to him. He placed them carefully on blankets near the fire, moving with a calm focus that hid the uncertainty growing inside him. He brought water, cleaned dust from their faces, and checked for injuries as gently as he could. The storm raged outside, but inside the house another kind of storm began, the slow breaking of rules he had once believed were unchangeable. As he sat nearby, watching their breathing grow steadier, he realized something had shifted. The silence of his life had been interrupted, and there was no easy way back to the old routine. He did not know who they were, where they came from, or what challenges might follow their arrival. But for the first time in years, the ranch felt alive in a way he had forgotten. The fire crackled softly, casting warm light across the room. Outside, the rain continued falling, washing dust from the land. Inside, the rancher leaned back against the wall, eyes heavy but alert, guarding the fragile peace that had begun in the middle of a storm. Morning came slowly after the storm. The desert felt fresh, as if the rain had washed away the weight of yesterday. Sunlight moved through the windows of the ranch house, touching the wooden floor and the quiet shapes resting near the fire. The rancher had not slept much. He sat in a chair through most of the night, watching the two women carefully. Their breathing had become steadier, and the color slowly returned to their faces. Several times he stood to add wood to the fire or check the bandages he had placed on small cuts and bruises. He was not used to sharing his space. Every sound felt louder than usual, the soft movement of blankets, the gentle sigh of someone dreaming, the faint rustle of wind outside. His house had always been silent, and now the silence carried life within it. When the first woman opened her eyes fully, she did not move right away. She looked around slowly, trying to understand where she was. Her gaze stopped when she noticed the rancher sitting nearby. For a moment, uncertainty crossed her face. He gave a small nod, calm and respectful, showing that she was safe. He did not step closer too quickly. He understood that trust could not be rushed. She tried to sit up but stopped when weakness returned to her body. He moved then, offering water carefully. She accepted it, drinking slowly. The second woman began to stir soon after, blinking against the sunlight as she woke. Communication was not easy at first. Words came slowly, and silence filled the spaces between them. They watched each other carefully, measuring intentions without needing many sentences. The rancher kept his voice quiet and simple. He explained that he had found them near the riverbed during the storm and brought them here so they could recover. He did not ask too many questions. He believed people should speak when they were ready. Over the next hours, small signs of trust began to appear. One woman gave a faint smile after tasting warm soup. The other nodded in gratitude when he brought clean blankets. They spoke softly between themselves, sometimes using words he did not understand, but their tone carried relief. Despite these moments, the rancher reminded himself that this situation was temporary. He repeated his rules silently, helped them recover, then allowed them to continue their journey. His life had worked because he avoided complicated connections, yet the house felt different already. Later that day, he stepped outside to continue his work, leaving the door slightly open so they could feel fresh air. As he repaired a fence damaged by the storm, he found his thoughts returning to the house again and again. He wondered about their story, about what had brought them so far into the desert. When he returned with fresh water, he found one of them standing near the window, holding onto the frame for balance. She turned when she heard him and offered a respectful nod. There was strength in her posture now, even though she was still weak. They began exchanging simple words. Names came first, spoken slowly so he could understand. Their voices carried calm but also hidden sadness, as if each name held memories they were not ready to share yet. Days passed and healing came gradually. They helped with small tasks when they felt stronger, folding blankets or preparing simple meals. The rancher found himself adjusting his routine without realizing it. He spoke more than usual, explaining where tools were kept or how the animals responded to certain sounds. The animals reacted to their presence in interesting ways. The horses seemed calmer when one of the women approached, as if sensing gentle energy. The rancher noticed this and felt surprised. He had always believed the animals trusted only him. Evenings became quieter but warmer. Instead of sitting alone near the fire, he listened to their voices, soft and thoughtful. Sometimes they told short stories about landscapes far from here, mountains, rivers, and communities filled with tradition. He listened without interrupting, feeling a strange sense of connection growing inside him. Still, he tried to keep emotional distance. He avoided asking about painful memories. He reminded himself that they would leave once they regained strength. One afternoon, while working near the barn, he noticed movement far away on the horizon. Riders, too far to identify clearly, but enough to make him alert. He watched until they disappeared behind distant hills, unsure whether they were travelers or something more. That evening, he said nothing about it. He did not want to create fear unnecessarily, yet a quiet tension settled in his mind. Inside the house, laughter appeared for the first time. One of the women tried to help cook and accidentally spilled flour across the table. The moment felt simple and human, and he surprised himself by laughing softly. The sound felt unfamiliar, almost strange, as if it belonged to another version of himself. Later, as he prepared sleeping spaces, he noticed how naturally the three of them moved around each other now. What had begun as cautious distance slowly transformed into shared rhythm. He sat outside after sunset, looking toward the horizon again. The sky turned deep orange, then faded into purple. He realized that his thoughts were no longer only about work or survival. He wondered about their future, about where they might go next, and whether the ranch would feel empty again when they left. The idea unsettled him more than he expected. Inside, the women spoke quietly, their voices calm and steady. They seemed stronger now, not only physically but emotionally. One of them approached the door and stepped outside, joining him near the porch. They did not speak immediately. The silence felt comfortable rather than awkward. Finally, she thanked him again, her words simple but sincere. He nodded, unsure how to respond to gratitude that felt deeper than ordinary politeness. The stars appeared slowly above them. The rancher realized that for the first time in years, he did not feel alone under the night sky. Yet somewhere beyond the hills, unseen by them, change continued moving closer. The riders he had noticed earlier were not random travelers. Their presence meant that the past of these two women had not been left behind completely. But for now, peace remained. Inside the ranch house, warmth replaced cold silence. The rancher sat quietly, aware that his carefully built rules were already shifting, even if he had not admitted it to himself. The days that followed felt calmer on the surface, but something unseen had begun to shift. The ranch moved with a new rhythm now. Morning sunlight filled the house with warmth, and quiet conversations replaced the silence that had once defined the place. The rancher still followed his routines, but they no longer felt as heavy or lonely as before. The two women grew stronger with each passing day. Their movements became more confident, and their eyes held more life. They began walking outside, slowly at first, feeling the dry earth beneath their feet again. The wide desert landscape no longer felt like an enemy to them, but something familiar and steady. One morning, the rancher noticed one of the women standing near the horses. She spoke softly to one of them, her voice calm and gentle. The horse lowered its head, relaxed in her presence. He watched from a distance, surprised by how naturally she connected with the animals. He approached quietly, not wanting to disturb the moment. She turned toward him and smiled, a small but genuine expression. Without many words, she showed him how she had learned to calm nervous animals through patience rather than force. He listened carefully, realizing that even after years of working with horses, he still had things to learn. Trust between them grew through small shared experiences. They worked together to repair a section of fence damaged by the storm. They carried water buckets across the yard and laughed when one nearly slipped in the mud left behind by the rain. These simple moments felt stronger than long conversations. One evening, as they sat near the fire, the women began sharing more about their journey. Their voices remained calm, but their eyes carried memories that were not easy to describe. They spoke about leaving behind a place where they no longer felt safe. They had chosen the desert path because it offered freedom, even though it came with great risk. The rancher listened without interruption. He did not ask too many questions, but he understood that their journey had not been easy. There were hints of people searching for them, of expectations they had chosen to escape. A quiet tension settled inside him as he realized that helping them might bring unexpected challenges. His land had always been peaceful, protected by distance and silence. Now, that peace felt fragile. The next day, while checking the outer fields, he noticed fresh tracks near the edge of his property. Horse tracks, more than one rider. They were not old. The dust still held the shape clearly. He crouched down, studying the ground carefully. His chest tightened slightly. Travelers passed through the desert often, but something about these tracks felt purposeful. They were moving in a direction that could lead toward his ranch. He returned home without showing concern, but his senses remained alert. That evening, he made sure tools were placed where he could reach them easily. He checked the fences again, even though they were already strong. The women sensed the change in his behavior. One of them approached him after dinner, her expression serious. Without many words, she asked if something was wrong. He hesitated, then mentioned the tracks calmly. They exchanged a glance that carried unspoken understanding. It was clear they knew the possibility of being followed had always existed. One of them spoke softly, explaining that some people did not accept their decision to leave. She did not describe details, but her tone showed determination rather than fear. The rancher felt a quiet shift inside himself. His old rules told him to avoid involvement, to protect his own life above all else. But when he looked at them, he realized that walking away was no longer an option he wanted. Over the following days, they worked together more closely. The women showed strong skills. One had knowledge of herbs and natural remedies, helping improve the small garden near the house. The other assisted with repairs, proving surprisingly strong and capable. The ranch no longer felt like a place of isolation. It felt alive. One afternoon, while gathering firewood near a hill, they saw distant riders again. This time, the figures were clearer. They moved slowly, scanning the land as if searching for something. The rancher guided the women back toward the house calmly. He did not want to create panic, but he knew they needed to be prepared. They discussed simple plans, staying together, avoiding unnecessary risks, and facing any situation with calm communication. That night felt heavier than usual. The stars shone brightly above, but the silence carried tension. The rancher sat outside longer than usual, watching the horizon. He thought about his past, about why he had built so many rules around himself. Those rules had once protected him, but now they felt like walls separating him from something important. Inside the house, the women spoke quietly, their voices steady. They were not afraid, but they understood the seriousness of the situation. One of them approached him outside and sat beside him. For a long time, they said nothing, sharing the quiet space under the sky. Finally, she spoke about trust, how sometimes people must choose to stand together even when uncertainty exists. Her words stayed with him long after she returned inside. The next morning arrived with clear skies and a warm breeze. Everything looked peaceful, but the rancher knew change was coming. He felt it in the air, in the way birds moved differently, in the way silence seemed to hold its breath. He realized that the life he had built around distance and solitude was already transforming. Helping these women had opened something inside him that could not be closed again. As the sun rose higher, he stood near the fence, watching the open land. He did not know what challenges would arrive or how his future would change. But for the first time in many years, he did not feel trapped by fear of loss. Instead, he felt ready to protect something meaningful. The air felt different that morning. The sky was clear and wide, but a quiet tension rested over the ranch like an invisible shadow. The rancher woke earlier than usual, stepping outside before sunrise. The desert stretched in every direction, calm and silent, yet he sensed that something was about to change. He walked slowly along the fence line, eyes scanning the horizon. The tracks he had seen before stayed in his thoughts. He could not ignore the feeling that someone was searching, moving closer step by step. Inside the house, the two women had already begun their morning routine. They moved with more strength now, helping prepare food and organizing tools. Their presence no longer felt temporary. Instead, the ranch seemed to shape itself around them naturally, as if they had always belonged there. When the rancher returned inside, he noticed how easily they spoke and worked together. The quiet laughter that filled the room felt unfamiliar but welcome. Still, beneath the warmth, he felt the need to remain alert. After breakfast, they stepped outside together. The sun rose slowly, lighting the land with golden color. One of the women paused, looking toward the hills in the distance. Her expression grew serious, as if she sensed something unseen. Before anyone spoke, movement appeared far away, 3 riders. They were small shapes against the horizon at first, but their direction was clear. They moved slowly, carefully, as if studying the land. The rancher's body grew still. He watched silently, measuring distance and time. The women noticed his focus and turned toward the riders. A quiet understanding passed between them. The moment they had expected had finally arrived. No one panicked. Instead, they moved calmly back toward the house. The rancher checked the animals, guiding them into a safe area. He closed the barn doors and secured the tools outside. Every movement felt slow and careful, controlled by experience. Inside the house, they spoke quietly about what might happen. The women explained that the riders might only want to talk, but they could not be sure. They did not want conflict. They only wanted freedom to live their own lives. The rancher listened, his thoughts steady. Long ago, he would have chosen distance, stepping away from any situation that could bring trouble. But now he felt something stronger than hesitation. He felt responsibility. Not because he had promised anything, but because he cared. As the riders came closer, their shapes became clearer. Dust rose behind their horses, drifting slowly through the air. The rancher stepped outside alone, choosing to meet them before they reached the house. He stood calmly near the gate, waiting. The riders stopped several steps away. Their expressions were serious but not aggressive. One of them spoke first, asking questions about the land and whether he had seen 2 travelers pass through. The rancher answered carefully. He did not lie, but he also did not reveal more than necessary. He said that people sometimes cross the desert, but he did not involve himself in others' journeys. The conversation remained calm but tense. The riders looked around the ranch, observing details carefully. They were searching, but they did not force anything. Inside the house, the women watched through the window. Their faces remained steady, but their hands tightened slightly as they waited. After several minutes, one of the riders spoke again, explaining that they wanted only to ensure the safety of the women they were looking for. Their words sounded polite, but the rancher sensed something deeper: expectations, control, and a belief that they had the right to decide another person's future. He felt a quiet firmness rise within him. He told them that anyone staying on his land did so by choice. He would not allow pressure or force. His voice stayed calm, but the meaning was clear. Silence followed. The wind moved gently between them, carrying dust across the ground. Finally, one rider nodded slowly. They did not argue further. Instead, they turned their horses and began riding away, disappearing slowly toward the hills. The rancher remained still until they were gone from sight. Only then did he release the breath he had been holding. When he returned inside, the tension softened. The women stepped forward, their expressions filled with relief. They thanked him, but he shook his head gently. He had only done what felt right. The experience changed something inside him. For years, he had lived by rules that kept people at a distance. Those rules had protected him from disappointment and pain, but they had also kept him from connection. Standing at the gate had felt different from anything he had done before. He had not acted from fear, he had acted from belief. That evening they sat together outside, watching the sky turn deep orange as the sun disappeared. The ranch felt peaceful again, but the air carried a new energy. They spoke openly about the future. The women explained that they had chosen their path carefully, leaving behind expectations that no longer matched their hearts. They did not know exactly where they would go next, but they knew they wanted freedom more than anything. The rancher listened quietly. He realized that their courage had changed him. They had shown him that life could not be controlled entirely by rules. Later, as night fell, he walked alone toward the edge of the land. The stars filled the sky, bright and endless. He thought about the man he had been before they arrived, careful, distant, protected by silence. Now he felt different. He understood that breaking his own rules had not destroyed his life. Instead, it had given him something new: purpose, connection, and the chance to grow beyond old fears. When he returned to the house, warm light welcomed him. The sound of quiet voices inside felt like home. And though he did not yet know what the future would bring, he knew one truth clearly: the walls he had built around himself were no longer needed. The ranch was no longer just a place of survival. It had become a place of belonging. The morning after the riders left felt quieter than usual. The desert stretched wide and peaceful again, but something inside the rancher had changed forever. He stepped outside before sunrise, just as he always did, yet the air felt lighter. The sky slowly turned from deep blue to soft gold, and the world seemed calm in a new way. For many years, mornings had been filled with routine and silence. Now, when he turned toward the house, he saw movement through the window, two figures preparing breakfast, speaking softly, their voices blending with the sounds of the waking land. It was a simple sight, but it carried warmth he had not known for a long time. He walked toward the barn first, checking the horses as usual. One of the animals moved closer to him, and he noticed how relaxed it seemed. The ranch itself felt different, almost as if it had been waiting for this change. When he returned inside, the smell of food greeted him. One of the women handed him a cup of warm drink with a gentle smile. The moment felt natural, not forced. He realized that the feeling of being alone had slowly disappeared without him noticing when it happened. They spoke about small things at first, the weather, repairs needed around the ranch, plans for the day. But beneath these simple words, a deeper conversation waited. Later that morning, they walked together across the land. The sun rose higher, warming the ground under their feet. The women paused near a hill that overlooked the valley, standing quietly as if taking in the view one last time. One of them finally spoke, her voice calm but thoughtful. She explained that now that the riders had left, they needed to decide their next step. They had always planned to continue their journey after regaining strength. The rancher felt a tightness in his chest he did not expect. He had told himself from the beginning that their stay was temporary, yet the thought of the ranch returning to silence felt heavier than before. He nodded slowly, showing respect for their freedom. He did not want to hold them back from their own path. Still, part of him hoped they might choose to stay longer. They returned to the house and spent the afternoon working together. They repaired broken boards near the fence, cleaned tools, and prepared supplies. Each action felt meaningful because it was shared. As evening approached, they gathered near the fire. The sky outside turned deep orange, and long shadows stretched across the ground. One of the women spoke about how the ranch had given them more than shelter. It had given them time to breathe, to heal, and to think clearly about their future. The rancher listened quietly. He felt proud but also unsure of how to express what their presence had meant to him. She continued, explaining that sometimes people find unexpected places that feel like home. Her words hung gently in the air. Silence followed, but it was not uncomfortable. It felt full of understanding. The next morning arrived with a sense of decision. The women packed small bundles, preparing for the possibility of leaving. The rancher helped without speaking too much, keeping his emotions steady. When everything was ready, they stepped outside together. The horses waited calmly, and the road stretched far into the distance. One of the women turned toward him, her expression soft but certain. She said that before arriving here, they had believed they needed to keep moving forever to find peace. But during their time at the ranch, they realized that peace sometimes appears where you least expect it. She asked him a simple question, whether there was space for them to stay, not as guests but as partners in building something new. The rancher stood still, surprised by the sudden warmth that filled his chest. He had prepared himself for goodbye, yet now a different future stood before him. He looked around the land, the fences, the barn, the wide sky. For years, he had protected this place alone, believing that solitude was strength. Now he understood that strength could also come from connection. He nodded slowly, unable to hide the quiet relief in his eyes. They unpacked their bundles again, laughter breaking through the tension. The decision felt natural, as if it had always been waiting. Life moved forward with a new rhythm. Days were filled with shared work and shared purpose. The women brought new ideas, improving the garden and helping care for the animals. The rancher found himself smiling more often, speaking more freely. Evenings became moments of reflection and storytelling. They shared memories, hopes, and dreams for the future. The ranch transformed from a place of survival into a place of belonging. Weeks passed, and the land seemed to respond to the change. Crops grew stronger, animals moved with calm energy, and the house felt alive with quiet joy. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, the rancher stood alone near the fence. He looked toward the horizon, remembering the moment he had first seen two figures lying in the sand. That single decision had changed everything. He realized that his old rules had once protected him, but they had also kept him from experiencing life fully. Breaking those rules had not brought chaos, it had brought meaning. Behind him, he heard footsteps. The two women approached, standing beside him as they watched the sky change colors. No words were needed. The silence felt complete. The stars began to appear one by one, filling the sky with quiet beauty. The rancher felt a deep sense of peace settle within him, not the empty peace of isolation, but the full peace of connection and trust. The journey that had started with uncertainty ended with something stronger than any rule he had ever followed. It ended with belonging.